I was going to try to describe him in a couple words, I would describe him as an innovator and the most passionate person that I know advocating working towards carbon neutrality. And he's been doing it for a really long time. Both Doug and I have been involved in Chicago's planning and design community for longer than I certainly would care to admit. But when we first met each other, it was both working in historic preservation. And I stayed in that arena quite a bit longer, but Doug started being a true innovator in sustainability. And in 2003, he was the architect for the Center for Green Technology in Chicago, which was the third LEED Platinum building in the world. And the first city-led LEED Platinum building and first renovation building of that type. It was a sustainability training center for policymakers and designers. So I think that in and of itself speaks, volumes, particularly back in 2003. But he didn't stop there. He went on to co-chair the USGBC's LEED neighborhood development, establishing the standards for that. He's written 2 books on urban sustainable design with specifically the goal to change the world. The second one is sort of like a how-to book that you could even do in your own communities. Just the other day, I was reading in the newspapers, I didn't even know he was working on this, but one of his latest projects is in downtown Gary, Indiana. For those of you who know anything about Gary, Indiana, the fact that they're working on a net zero energy, mixed use, multifamily, affordable housing development in what is a very depressed center city is incredible. And then of course, kind of the reason why he's here today, which is he just designed the building, the Keller Center, which is the home for the Harris School of Public Policy. Opened, I believe it was like not this past winter quarter, but the winter quarter before that. So it would have been in the January of 2019, and correct me if I'm wrong. And it's just been a game changer for the building, for the program. The program is just growing like crazy. And then more specifically, as it relates to this group, it's the university's first like on-campus platinum building and its first living building challenge, which he'll talk to you about. And actually, I forgot, but he had worked on a building that's we had developed off campus on our Main Street commercial district, which is also a LEED Platinum building, or yes, as well. So, and the main thing that I would say about the Keller Center, and I know Doug's gonna talk a lot more about this, so I'm just gonna say like 2 things. One is that I think anybody who's tried to do energy efficiency with mid-century modern buildings, I think you'll be super impressed that he was able to achieve the platinum in that area. And I really do want to say that he stayed committed to the project for the long haul, and without his leadership on sustainability, the project would not have come in the way it did. So I just want to, with that, I guess I'll just turn it over to Doug.
Thank you, Alicia. That was very gracious. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Faces. How's everybody doing? It's sunny here in Chicago. We wish you were here taking the tour actually rather than virtually. So let me get my slides queued up.
Doug, and as you do that, I'm just going to let people know that we are recording this session. So it can be captured for later on, and we did record the intro as well. So I just wanted to make sure people know that, and that you'll have a 45-minute presentation, and we're going to do Q&A, so people can please use the engagement platform. We have a section for you on page 10 to put your questions to Doug for afterwards.
Perfect. So thank you so much. So this project that I'm about to describe to you, the Keller Center, the first permanent home for the Harris School of Public Policy, is a project I felt like I spent my whole career preparing for. It's just profoundly moving, and it's the manifestation of a bunch of ideas that we've been kicking around in our office. So I'm going to give you a little sort of get in my head preface here in a second, and you'll sort of see what we were thinking about. So every project of this magnitude and achievement has a full team. Here's most of our consultant team, you know, all kinds of specialties, a couple that I'll call out in a sustainability sense. We had a daylighting consultant, multiple energy modeling consultants. We had a chemist to assist us in achieving the Living Building Challenge materials PETAL, checking the red list on every product in the building. And, you know, an amazing thing that this got contracted for at the University of Chicago. And maybe in the Q&A, we can talk about the contracting process, because I think, you know, every project starts with a great client and a great contract. So we'll talk about that for a minute. So, but by way of introducing Farr Associates, we're a little shop. We've been as big as 20 architects and as small as about 8 over our lifetime. Here's a timeline of our work. Above the line are buildings we've designed. Below the lines are urban places we have planned or urban designs. So we really think of ourselves as doing places and buildings both. And so we toggle back and forth, applying innovations from one to the other. So you'll see, I think in the Keller Center, some aspects of urbanism that come inside the building. And I think that's pretty cool. So we got contracted for this by the university in the year 2009, and I just finished my first book, Sustainable Urbanism, but was starting to work on Sustainable Nation, book 2. And what I wanted to do as a kind of preface is to say, so Sustainable Nation came out in 2017, 2 years before the building did, but it was really written simultaneous with the design of the Keller Center. And so I was putting in the book ideas that I hoped to achieve in the building, and was also addressing kind of big, scary national trends that we identified in the book. And if there was one sort of simple summary of what Sustainable Nation is about, it is that sustainability has always been about what I say the x-axis, which is cost. You know, can we do better and respect a budget, and build it cost competitive and operate it in a cost competitive way. So the y-axis is performance. You know, how's our energy doing? How's our water savings, our materials, indoor air quality, all the metrics that the key performance indicators that we track. But the z-axis was pretty much missing, which is time. How long does it take to do that, and how do you scale up? Which is I'm sure a concern of this smart and progressive group. So I always start with this slide just to say this is a map of the Eastern United States. You can pick that out. And the shape that you see there, excuse me, is the state of Illinois hypothetically moving south. So, but this is well underway. This is based on US EPA data that says that Illinois will have the climate of at the turn of the century, the climate of East Texas. So, and the Chicago will go from being a heating dominated climate to a cooling dominated climate. So, as an architect, we're trained to design things uniquely suited to their climate. So we've taken it upon ourselves to say building science teaches us how to design for all the 4 climate zones in the middle there. So, Sustainable Nation. So this Bloomberg graphic was really just hit me right at about the right time, 2013 or 2014, which tracked the 225-year history of some legal issues. So the one I'll point out here is 1787 is interracial marriage first appeared as an issue in the United States. This is the number of states in the United States, the number of states that have adopted whatever the measure was. And then finally, when it was legalized or federalized, often validated through Supreme Court decision. But you can see here, social change takes generations and in some cases centuries. And then there are the little, kind of fast sprinters here. Oberfell versus Hodges, a same-sex marriage, and then legalization of marijuana. So, but that idea of tracking long trends over generations really sort of caught me, and we mapped a few that I want to share with you that will manifest themselves in the Keller Center. So, first one I'm going to talk about is just obesity in the United States. So this is the United States is adults in the United States are on track by the year 2030 that 50% of adult Americans will be obese. And so this is happening in the 2 years since the book came out that we're right at 40% obesity. And this has an immense burden on our population, on healthcare, and all those kinds of things. It is not to stigmatize anybody, but it is trends that have been building for a long time. But what can a building do to tackle obesity? Next one I want to talk about is carbon. And this is US CO2 output, and it peaked in the year 2005 in part due to deindustrialization, offshoring of manufacturing and things like that, along with some actual efficiency gains along the way. But here's what it looks like. And then the green sloped line here, you see if you follow the AIA 2030 or any of the various architecture challenges, that's the goal, is to be 80% reduced in 10 years time, 2030. So we asked ourselves, is this realistic? Can we do this? What can we do to speed it up and scale it up? And, when will we decarbonize? And we couldn't answer that question. So I'm going to take a quick poll of you, because you all know the answer, right? So option A is we will decarbonize in the year 2030. Option B, 2050, C, 2070, D, 2090. Take your votes. I can't see you. Raise your hand, however you want to do. But anyway, those are the choices we're offering. So to answer the question, what we did was looked at other trends. And in this case, cigarette smoking cessation is the single best public health trend reversal that we have in the US, the single most powerfully promulgated campaign in the whole bit. And this is what the curve looks like. So it's more or less a bell curve. So we asked ourselves, if we decarbonize at the rate of smoking cessation, what does that look like? The answer is we would decarbonize by the year 2150, which is about 100 years too slow, maybe even more. So we're not doing, this is a scary outcome, but it sobers me up and hopefully all of us up to say, carbon takes a long time. Its consequences are way past our lifetimes and frankly the lifetimes of our children and grandchildren, but it happens, a few generations out. Catastrophic things happen. So it's hard for us to pay attention to things that are not in our immediate view and affect the distant future, but I think we've got to do it. So that was my kind of preface. That was the architect that sat down to design the Keller Center when it came back alive in 2014. So here's the site. If you haven't been here, I can't promise you a drone eye view, but it's quite lovely. This is the Midway. The University of Chicago campus is here to the left or the north. Lake Michigan is dead ahead. And then to the south is Gary and the steel mills in Indiana and so on. So, but here, this sort of blue column of mystery is the site of the Keller Center. There's a lot of construction going on the South Campus. So when you next come to town, we'll walk you around. But here's just again, to orient you, here's here's the Midway. The view we just took was a drone view looking east. Here's the Keller Center, and Midway, connected Washington Park and Jackson Park. So if you aren't familiar with it, the World's Fair was held in Chicago in 1893 on the Midway. And so if you've ever been to a state fair or any kind of gathering that has a Midway, which, can be Cupid dolls and throwing hardballs to, win a prize and, crazy exhibits and food and things, this is Midway #1. And so this is a view of what the Midway looked like. The lake is in the background. You can see the spectacular building construction. University will appear here in years to come. So it was absolutely, 23 million people visited the fair, I think is the number, in the years 1893 and 1894. And so we're right on that history, facing that. The building that we were asked to renovate was designed by a mid-century, one of the kind of handful of mid-century leaders, Edward Durell Stone. It's the gentleman in the upper left who looks thrilled to be here. The building was derived very much from a design he had done for in 1954 for the US Embassy in Delhi, India. And it was a modern temple up on a plinth. And so he proposed this to the University of Chicago. And incidentally, there's a great kind of architectural history here. Eero Saarinen, for those fans of mid-century architecture, who was based in Michigan, was hired by the university in the late 50s, early 60s to be acting campus architect, and in turn hired himself and Mies van der Rohe and Edward Durell Stone each to design a building on the South Campus. So, but here's the one we were working with. And in my write-up for Ivy Plus, I wrote with some amusement, if the view on the upper right is a building that said to pedestrians, keep walking. So it's a plinth, it's up on a barrier. The architectural style, when we sort of got on board, we characterized as neo-Langley, that it's just some drab, apparatchiks are in there running numbers or something like that. And you, heaven forbid, you should get inside because you'll never get out. So that was Ed Stone. This building, here's the kind of colonnade, which was the prominent architectural feature of the building today, and was important for the precedent building in India to, shed sun in the hot summers of India. When he brought it to Chicago, the form really didn't fit our climate, didn't make sense, but there we have it. So it's an interesting building. It's got great bones, but it's a curiosity in his career, not his best work, in my opinion, but I've come to love this man for all his flaws. So, but you come in the door. This is the kind of main entrance, which is seen here up the set of steps. And the only natural light inside the space is the door that you entered through. So you came in, it was completely artificially lit. There's a little sort of Mad Men interior, sort of showing how a model apartment was tricked out in the day with some Mies furniture and so on. So the punchline is, why you should care about this project is that, as Alicia referred to, it's the university's first on-campus platinum. I know there are some people on this call that are quite advanced in this regard, so keep it up, but university's on the map. But we believe that we may have, one-upped some of you in pursuing the Living Building Challenge. And if you're not familiar with that, it's LEED was conceived of in 1996, the Living Building Challenge 10 years later in 2006. And it was conceived of as something that was in response to the flexibility and reasonableness of LEED. The Living Building Challenge was conceived of as inflexible and unreasonable. So it offers a couple of compliance paths. One is to do full Living Building Challenge, and the other one is to do either energy or water or materials. And we sussed it out and really could only achieve materials here at University of Chicago. So that's what we did. So we believe we're the largest project in higher ed that's certified in any way under Living Building Challenge, but we hope to get passed right away. So maybe it's already happened since we did that. But here's the transformed front of the Keller Center. You can see we've eroded the plinth that was quite the barrier. We've clawed away at the limestone facade, and then we've added a transparent kind of light-filled executive training center on the 4th floor, aka the penthouse, but we can't call it the penthouse. So anyway, a couple of the things I wanted to point out is this central 4 bays, and as well as the penthouse, is all bird glass. I'll show you that in a minute. And that example, I should pause and say, one of the exciting things about Keller and the fact that the client was a public policy school was the opportunity, frankly, the need to embody public policy in the building. So bird glass, and this, the Keller Center became an example with the city of Chicago, which is trying to pass a bird glass ordinance. If you don't know, the second leading cause of death of birds is buildings. The leading cause of death, cats. The 6th leading cause of death of birds is wind turbines. So 1/10,000th the lethality of cats. So if you're concerned about birds, get rid of your cats. But anyway, we are doing our bit for bird glass. And then the building catches its rainwater to put in a 15,000 gallon cistern and flush toilets. The overflow surfaces right here. There's the output. I'll show you that in a minute. So the other thing was we didn't erode the plinth simply at the formal north entrance. We did so also at this northwest corner, which we found, following the lines of desire of where students at Harris wanted to travel on campus. They went to the econ school, the business school, and those destinations were out to the northwest. So we kind of clawed away at this corner as well. So pretty cool. The plinth, so the building sits up in a plinth, and the innovation made sense in India because they parked cars under it. And so if you've ever been to a hot climate and left a car out in the sun, you can absolutely burn yourself. So that was the Indian precedent, had parking underneath. We just got a plinth. But we made something out of it by retrofitting landscape on both the east and west ends. So these little gardens are really quite charming. Here's the discharge point that I showed you a minute ago. There's the formal front entry is to our right here. Here's the discharge. And in in heavy rain events, there is an overflow. And it's really quite lovely. You do want to, you have this instinct when it's raining to step outside and take a look at it because it's a little waterfall. So here's our 15,000 gallon cistern. We have a room labeled cistern room. So it's not much to look at. We had hoped to do a float valve, but that just didn't happen. So we could sort of see what the magnitude of water volume was at any given point. So here's the construction. Couple things I wanted to say about it. It's a monolithic concrete pour. It is fireproof, type 1 fireproof construction. Good luck lighting it on fire. And it floats on a 4-foot deep mat slab. So it's the slab overshoots the building by about 10 feet in all directions. And the building just floats on that. The water table here is at about it fluctuates, actually. The water table fluctuates based on the winds of Lake Michigan, but as shallow as 5 feet and as deep as 9 feet, something like that. So the lower level of the building is actually below the water table. So it floats in a bathtub, not unlike the World Trade Center of yore. So but anyway, fully fireproof construction, hold that thought. So the building facade was true limestone. So if you can see here, this is the detail for before. So exterior is top, interior is bottom. So these are actual kind of hexagonal limestone mullions. You see them here in the photograph. We wrapped them with insulation on the inside, and then we installed storm windows on the inside. So to Alicia's comment about innovation and preservation, to make this mid-century building work from an energy standpoint, we really had to super think it. And frankly, because the facade was so important to the story and the architect's statement here, all of the work was done from the interior. And just to say, the top image here is also an infrared image of the facade, and you can see how effective limestone is at actually communicating or transferring heat from the indoors to the outdoors. And so if you've not played around with an infrared camera, you can get them now for your iPhone for about $200. So please do that as campus architects and so on. Walk around in the cold weather and take pictures, and you'll know what building to renovate next. But so here's the above is the before and the below is the after, and you can see the red colors indicate heat loss, a concern here, and then the blue colors indicate an absence of heat loss. In the foreground here, you'll see at the ceiling is our radiant heating and cooling panels, which is one of the great innovations we installed in the building. If you don't know this, it is much more efficient to transfer heat and cold throughout a building using liquid more so than air. It's 40% more energy efficient to transfer that heat via liquid, and we were able to get a beautiful kind of lustrous copper finish where in public areas where that was important. So here's two sections of the building. The upper image there is a section east-west, so it's quite a battleship of a building. It's not quite the size of a soccer field, but if you can imagine this, when Stone opened it in 1963, there were literally only windows at the edges. There was no natural light, and it's about 150 feet wide and 270 feet long, something like that, no natural light. But if you, in studying his kind of, his oeuvre complete, whatever, what we found was there were vestiges in this section of the embassy he had designed in Delhi. Let me point them out to you. So there was that large sort of central space, the one that I said only had natural light at the door, was a two-story space here. So that is a double height volume. If you look up here and here, you'll also see another double height volume, two additional double height volumes. In his original design, he was thinking they would be skylit atria. And he hired a Chicago mechanical engineer and said, don't do that here. So he didn't do that and just roofed them over. So it was kind of silly and a missed opportunity, but needless to say, we saw them for their potential, and those became some of the highlights of the most exciting spaces in the Keller Center. So this is the Keller Forum, and then these are the two light courts, sky courts east and west. So other things you can see, this is facing south. The elevators, there were two of them, two passenger elevators, and the freight elevator was sort of hidden over on the side. But the building was designed, let me go back a couple and get you this. So this is interesting to me. The University of Chicago was here. post-war in the 60s, it was starting to expand. It jumped over the Midway and was encroaching into the neighborhood here. So there was some concern about displacement from the neighbors, and I think this some of this period, Alicia would know the period better, but I think it triggered a kind of good kind of conversation between the university and the neighborhood. You know, please don't expand anymore if you can. But the building itself reflected a kind of walling off, and so that primary entrance from the north. And the putting back to the section here, putting the core immediately to the south, so that you would only enter the building from the north, spin around, do your business, and absolutely exit to the north. There was no facility for you to actually continue pass through the building and get continue walking south to the neighborhood. So this is the section retained on the lower level, and then these are the kind of spaces that we've created. So the Sky Courts east and west, the Harris Forum in the middle, and then the Grand Stair there on the right. I'll show you all those things again. So we had we took different attitudes in each of the spaces. So first thing to say was the dean, who was in office in his job when we were designing this, is a gentleman named Daniel Diermeyer, who really was a brilliant dean, went on to become provost, and now he is president of Vanderbilt University. But he really had a vision for this, and I credit him as a person who was willing to kind of explore innovations in ways that I had not seen before. So great credit to Daniel in his work. But one of the things he urged us to do in the design, he said, Doug, when students come in here, first of all, no one knows what we do. We're a very quantitative school. So the first year of public policy for the master's program is really learning problem sets and linear regressions. And so these are poor kids, you know, in windowless rooms, working on laptops and whiteboards and the whole thing. He said, but it's interesting when you see people doing it. So Doug, when visitors come to our building, I want them to be able to see the veins popping on the necks of the students working their problem sets. So this became a transparent kind of gallery of being able to see up into team rooms and work rooms and seminar rooms and so on, and see all the kind of comings and goings. And so this is the Harris Forum, and I'll show it to you a couple other times. But the point here is we chose in this case to have our new skylights face south, and with it the intention that we would have light penetrate down in shafts that, you know, as an architect you could be, you know, consider that you weren't doing your job because you've allowed glare to happen. In this case, we thought it was the opposite. If you've spent a long winter in Chicago, December is just, you know, depressing and there's no light and so on. So we thought it was important that there actually be shafts of light that would track through the forum during the kind of coldest, longest winter days, short days, long nights. So this was intentional glare, and it mostly bounced off this this beam up here and a little bit into the study carrel. So a feature of the building is one that I'm so proud of. It's this monumental stair. You see it here. It goes to the lowest level, first, second, third, and up to the roof. So it's a continuous 4-story open stair. And here it is again, and this goes back to that obesity trend. So one of the collaborators for our book, Sustainable Nation, was Dick Jackson, who used to be at the Centers for Disease Control. And he is, you know, leading public health official in terms of obesity prevention. And his advice is, you know, finding is basically people who climb 20 flights of stairs a week have a 20% reduced chance of heart disease and other kind of chronic conditions. And so making the stair attractive and making it the default vertical circulation was the game we were doing here. So there is an elevator, passenger elevator. So if you can see in this image here, the two kids sitting there, that kind of dark wall, the elevator is tucked behind the wall. So it is a part of decision architecture to make the stair prominent and fun and celebrated, and then sort of kind of put the elevator, make it accessible. It needs to be, you know, convenient for people who need it, but most people don't, and to make the stair the default. So we believe that this is the manifestation of good public health policy in the building. And just one other kind of prickly anecdote, which is it bugs the bejesus out of me because, and let's see if I have it. Yeah, here we go. So the building codes are really mismatched with the challenges we face. So Chicago burned down in 1871, and it still has repercussions in our building code, which is very conservative when it comes to fire-rated assemblies and so on. But this is a chart, again, from Sustainable Nation that, that tipped me off to what the trend was. And so the two data sets here are the rate of cigarette smoking in the United States from 1980 to 2007 or so, and then deaths by fire in the United States going down at the same time. And so roughly speaking, about 3,000 people die a year in the United States from fire, but it is, you can see, draw your own conclusions, but it correlates strongly with cigarette smoking. So when we made buildings smoke-free, which they mostly are, the hazard of dying from fire or being injured in a kind of smoke event in a building went down in direct proportion. And so I think of it as fire marshals and the fire safety elements of a code are still fighting the last battle. This one's, fires will soon be much less of a risk than they are today. So, but to install this open stair, the project had to incur about a $250,000 cost for a smoke evacuation system, and that was to make this stair healthy. Now, mind you, I shared a minute ago, the stair is healthy because people that use it are, have better lives, longer lives, lower mortalities and morbidities, all this kind of stuff. But in the very narrow sense, it's perceived to make you slightly at risk. Mind you, it's a non-combustible, all cast concrete building. So the absurdities of the building code. We, in pursuing the red list on the Living Building Challenge, the mantra is basically start with, the best thing you can do is to reuse a material that's already had, some life in service in some other capacity. So we really did try and we inventoried the entire building, salvaged the elements out of it that we could, and I'll show you those in a minute, and then supplemented those with, reclaimed materials, reused materials, and so on. So it was a very kind of elegant, kind of gray slate architect's palette, complemented with natural wood and some natural metals. So in terms of salvage, here's a couple of examples. One is the chandeliers you can see there. There were 4 of those in the original kind of 2-story space. We saved them and put them in this long kind of student gathering area. Second one was we salvaged chalkboards from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and had them trucked to our site. So they were closing some public schools, and we were able to get those chalkboards, which was great. And I'll talk about the salvaged wood in a minute. But the other aspect of the Living Building Challenge PETAL certification for materials is the Declare label. And so if you're not familiar with it, it is a kind of proprietary label that was conceived of by the International Living Futures Institute that allows a product to declare what it's made of. And so you don't have to, the product doesn't necessarily have to exclude all of the 703 different red list chemicals that we're trying to vet out of the building stream. But if you aren't rid of them, at least you've published what's in them. And so that transparency is a very, on the Supreme Court and in materials like daylight is a great power of reform. So we, part of the protocol is that we contact every manufacturer and ask them to declare what's in their stuff. If they already have the Declare label, we can specify them without thinking about it a second time. So as the red list protocol expands and is done on more and more products declare themselves as Declare products. So it makes the whole thing easier. So further salvages, the limestone, when we took out those spandrel panels to open up the 4 middle bays, we salvaged the limestone and put it in the dean's office, and we salvaged artwork from benches from the outdoors. Another one of our social innovations we're really proud of, but is kind of a half measure, is all gender adaptable restrooms. So we laid out, you can see here, couple things. So here's the plan of a typical floor of restrooms, which we mostly consolidated in one sort of stacked plumbing core. But the ideal here is that each stall, pictured here in red, has a door that closes, the walls go to the floor, and then inside that is a kind of a sweet little deal, a little shelf to put your phone on, a little hook to hang your bag or purse on, a small makeup mirror to do whatever it is people do in makeup mirrors. And so it's really kind of a premium offering in terms of the, the experience of all the things we do in bathrooms, particularly if you're a student or a faculty member spending the day here. You need to freshen up and so on. So it's a really nice thing. But what we wanted to do then was to have, once you're out of your compartment, was the ability to sort of circulate freely and to wash your hands in common areas and things like that. And so everything was code acceptable up until the point where males and females, or different genders, would wash their hands together. And this ran afoul of the Illinois Plumbing Code as interpreted by the City of Chicago plumbing inspectors. And it was one of the most fascinating meetings. I wish we had recorded it, but it had really ancient theories of perceived threat. It was all done to protect the women who would be most certainly assaulted in a blended gender bathroom context. And then the other thing to say is the doors for the bathroom stalls were salvaged from the building before. So there you go. So here's the forum. Just lovely. It is every bit the success that we'd aimed for. It allows people of extroverts, introverts, quiet, gregarious, performers, librarians, and so on, to all find their perfect habitat, if you will. The most powerful collaboration probably is this one. The gentleman on the upper right is a Chicago artist and Harris faculty member, Theaster Gates, who is just an amazing artist, an amazing machine, amazing art producer, amazing marketer, and so on. But we sat down, and the dean had brought Theaster in, and we laid out what we were doing in terms of, we wanted to do a building that was healthy and use salvage materials. And he said, well, we had, the city of Chicago had suffered through an emerald ash borer attack, 10 or 15 years ago, where a lot of the ash trees got eaten by an infestation. And so the city cut those trees down and stockpiled them. And then somehow Theaster got hold of them. And he said, I've got these trees. There's no bugs in them anymore. They're all dead. But I've been wanting to start up a lumber shop, a kind of sawmill. And so we said, well, we'll be your first client. And so all the wood that you see in the Keller Center came through emerald ash borer trees as milled by community, community workers in Theaster's lumber mill. So totally cool. And again, here you have, what has become to be a little bit ubiquitous, but this sort of terraced seating and stadium seating. The one thing I'm proud of, a couple things here, is you can see the kind of level of millwork finish. So Theaster his group didn't do the finishes, but they provided the raw wood and they were detailed just beautifully. And one thing I am proud of is we were able to get just one side handrails down here so that this space does feel much more open than it would have. And just to say, in terms of the moving of the elevators that I mentioned, they used to sit, you can see those 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, that was one of the elevators. And then these are 2 of the 4 elevator columns. We removed the other 2 to kind of open this up. So it's really a dynamic space. Now underneath it is this, my favorite little cubby hole is right under that sort of stadium seating, the terrace seating. And throughout the day, you can find 1 or 2 students that think this is the best place. And once they get it in the morning, I think they put their stuff there and they never give it up until kind of the end of the day. But it's really a kind of a cool little cubby underneath. We salvaged and reinstalled the mailboxes from the original graduate residence hall, pictured here on the left. They don't have a function, but they're beautiful. And then Edward Durrell Stone, in the day when he was designing this, and if you see the buildings just before this and just after, it was clearly a I don't know, obsession, but certainly a focus of his practice, was this abstracted geometric ornamentation. And he was very much influenced by Frank Lloyd Wright. And if you know the Wright's texture block houses, in Pasadena and Southern California and so on, you can see the influence. So if you know the Hollyhock house, for example, it's sort of abstracted forms of nature. So there were 4 of those columns inside, and all of the colonnade on the outside is that same motif. So here you see again, the before and after, the kind of club room of, dark paneled wood and kind of boxy chairs, the floor getting cut out, the roof getting cut out, and then the transformation into Keller, the Harris Forum, excuse me. Here's the inaugural event on day one, a big busy day with all kinds of people draped over the sides and contributing to the forum. So the forum itself will seat about, I think on the edges and so on, something like 300 to 400, and then if you add in all the adjacent workrooms and conference rooms that have a sight line, it goes up to 600 or 700, and then if you add in video connections and so on, it's unlimited, obviously. So anyway, in other innovations, bird-friendly glass. It's the coolest glass because you can't tell it's bird-friendly until you're up upon it. We'll talk about this in a minute, but here's all of our policy innovations. We set aside about half of the roof for photovoltaic panels, and they generate 11% of the building's energy. We did not fill the roof, and did so intentionally. One, we kind of ran out of money at the time, but we thought this would be a natural donation platform for alumni, the class of 20, the class of 21. What are we going to write a check for? So we've already made the connection to say, just buy the solar panels and finish the roof. And if once the roof is fully populated with solar panels, they would generate 24% of the building's electricity. So here's a commanding view from that top floor, looking back towards the central campus and Rockefeller Chapel. Flexible seating, flexible walls, all that kind of stuff. And again, you can see here the radiant heating and cooling panel. So cooling is done here also with radiant systems, projection screens. So you can use the space in a variety of ways. So again, before and after, madmen in the upper left of white guys in suits drinking cocktails, and then the newly transformed lying on your back looking straight up at the ceiling of the Keller Forum. So again, the light courts in the left and the right sides, the before here, the after. In this case, we cut the skylights to face north for a glare-free kind of ambient light that works well with computer screens. Here's what a typical floor looks like. So we've got very generous windows in the corner, insulated with these don't seem to have their storms on them. But anyway, here's the kind of the perimeter zone of admin folks sitting out in the open, and then private offices to the interior. Here's our bird glass. If you can look really closely, there's a kind of spiderwebby feeling looking thing there. And then again, here's that motif of the geometric ornamentation on the columns. Some natural light that we were able to sneak into the top of the plinth at the two ends. And then just the building plans. Here's the site plan done by Site Design Inc. And we were able to, the coaching from Saarinen was clearly do an object building with large setbacks. So we took best advantage of them. And then here's our moves in terms of cutting into the building and introducing natural light in yellow. So I think we're about done. This is just the kind of closer to kind of put it in mind. This is the Ed Stone building in Delhi, India. And you can see the slender columns, the lattice facade. And by the way, there were no windows there. So the breeze would go right through the building. There was an interior court. And this was his translation 9 years later in Chicago. And you can see it doesn't fit quite as well. And this was just perverse in the day. So when he was told not to put skylights in it, what he did was one of these light ceilings. So it's like 200-foot candles. It's fluorescent tubes at 4-inch centers. And the thing was just broken and unfunctional at the time. But, there was a time when human beings thought that fluorescent lighting was, superior to daylight. So anyway, we fixed all that and look forward to your questions. I'll end the show.
Thank you, Doug. Round of applause, emoji applause, mute applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have had this ongoing list of questions that I'm going to read out to you, Doug. Looking forward to your responses here. The first question was, we would love to hear what the impetus was for UChicago pursuing a Living Building Challenge building. Was this a donor-driven or purchased by the design proposal or desired by the university client?
So it originated with the project manager who was working the project in 2009. a woman who no longer works at the university. And I'm not, you know, Alicia, we haven't talked about this, so this could be embarrassing, but I'm not sure that she asked so much permission as forgiveness. So we negotiated to add the red list to the contract. We were committed to it. She was committed to it. She got our contract approved. So it was really done in a kind of stealth way. I think Alicia would be far smarter about what the university's attitudes are about these things. But U Chicago does have a culture of fostering debate on campus. And when we sought to, just as an example, when we sought to undertake the all gender bathrooms, the architectural question of like, we want to do this, this is so cool, had to get elevated up to a president's level council to debate whether building all gender bathrooms would appear to take a side in a point of active debate in society. Because there was, I forget, southern states were, you know, not canceling conferences and so on based on the bathroom designs. But in this case, it sort of the red list slid under. It was in our contract, and then we were off and running, and we could just tell everybody that we met, the dean and so on, we're doing this red list thing. Oh, that's cool. You know, so it wasn't, that one did not get run up to the president's office for approval. So Alicia can correct me.
That's a great story. I never knew that. That predated my involvement with the project, and I'm frankly shocked. But it was originally your idea, right? That you ran by her?
Oh yeah, no, we wanted to do it, but you know, it was, who's the woman? She was a big Pittsburgh Penguin fan.
Yeah,
remember?
I can't remember her name, but that's interesting.
She was a character. But anyway, she's like, oh, I'm into that too. Yeah, we'll get that into the contract. It's like, okay, you know, this how it works? You know, I really like this.
Well, I think that is, you know, it's interesting that you lumped that kind of conversation in with the restrooms, because it was determined by the university that taking an advocacy position with the state and the city in terms of the gender neutral, all gender restrooms would be a political statement. So we have a commitment to never getting involved in politics. There was a report written by chaired by a law school faculty member, and it's called the Calvin Report, and it kind of governs that. So for example, we won't use our endowment to invest in sustainability or anything, because that's also taking a political statement. So we're very rigorous in the application of this Calvin Report. So I think that the Living Building Challenge was not really like a political statement. So I think that, I'm glad you snuck that in. I think that's great.
So it sounds like it got kind of snuck in there, but follow up to that question is, what about the costs that might be tied to that building?
Great question. So I'll start with fees, and then I'll talk about perceived construction cost premiums, and then I'll talk about benefits. So the fees, we added, I want to say between $150,000 and $200,000 to our fee to do this. And that included 2 consultants. One was the primary vetting agent that would take all the MSDS sheets for the products and vet them. And then kind of they had a sub-consultant chemist who, when they came across something they didn't understand or couldn't sort of reason through, would sort of weigh in on that. So the cost premium, because we were so thoughtful from the get-go to just specify things that were reused or reclaimed already, those didn't come at any cost premium. I think there was some number, it was under 1% cost premium for the construction cost. The FSC wood is, I think, among the higher costs, which is, it's in LEED and in LBC too. So the cost wasn't that bad if you started with it. If you thought of it late in the game, I think you'd pay quite a premium. But we really, you know, when we met the Astor, you got anything we can reuse here? So that was our mantra all along. And it, you know, starting with that as a mission made it possible. And then the success story that I wanted to share was, we were able to find one spray-on fireproofing product that had one of the 703, you know, red list products in it. And the chemist took a look at it and said, you know, the offending product here doesn't seem to have anything to do with either adhesion or fire retardants. It's just there. And so we, through the protocol, we corresponded with this company that made this spray on fireproofing and said, what's this chemical doing here? And they took about a month and they came back and said, we don't know, and we're getting rid of it. And that company went on to become a Declare company. And we've watched in the couple of years now that all of the competitors in that sector of the market are now becoming Declare products. And so by asking this one question in the right way, we were able to tip the chemical construction of a big sector of kind of building materials. So yay, U Chicago, yay, Harris School. So we had but that success was not guaranteed. We could have done the whole thing and not had a kind of a real good story to tell like that. But we were lucky to get a good story.
Could I just say one other thing about cost? Because I think this is important. The project came within budget, which is great. But I think as we were going through the process, a lot of times in projects, the sustainability innovations or the energy saving measures get value engineered in favor of maybe larger office sizes so that additions need to be larger and finishes and things like that. And that is where I think for sure the dean that Doug spoke about was a fabulous leader in terms of keeping sustainability to the fore. He was an incredible client. Facilities services can't, I'm sure many of our institutions, if not all of them, the academic side of the house really leads sort of the aspirational aspects of these projects. And so to have him there saying, no, this is something that we can't compromise on. We're going to compromise on something else. So for example, this building has the smallest faculty offices on campus at 120, which he was able to really and did have to lead very strongly on. And even that rooftop addition was made as small as possible, both from a preservation perspective, but also from a cost perspective. So I think there's always trade-offs. And luckily in this project, sustainability won the day. So
wonderful. Thank you. I have a next question here is regarding the bird-friendly glass. What portion of the Keller Center's windows has bird-friendly glass?
So we, the building had 10-year-old windows when we were doing our work, and we looked at the efficacy of replacing them with newer windows to get a higher performance, and it didn't make sense. It made a lot more sense to add interior storms because they would allow us to insulate the occupant from those limestone mullions. So we didn't get all new windows. So the only glass in the larger spandrel panels, the 4 central bays that we removed the limestone and spandrels, as well as the executive training center on the top floor. So, and it's a couple glasses. This is a German glass, and I want to say it was like a 2.5x, the cost of regular glass at the time. It's coming down a lot. It was pretty exotic at the time. So we're looking at it for we're doing our first full LBC project now, and the bird glass has dropped in price a lot. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Doug. So outside of natural lighting and accessible staircases, what are other ways we should be thinking about incorporating human health and wellness into building strategy and design?
Great question. So we didn't know to design the building to be perceived as COVID friendly, but a couple things that the building does make it that way. One is the windows open. There's a lot of, this is one of the biggest fights, and I will just say, dig in your heels and don't let the mechanical engineer or the architect convince you that you should have inoperable windows. So in the Keller Center, everyone can go into their postage stamp sized 120 square foot office, but open their window. And so, if you're a little hot, you're a little cold, or you just want to breathe, you can do that. So it's good for COVID. The other thing is, because we're using radiant heating and cooling, so that uses liquid to transfer heat in the building, we aren't also using ducted air to change the temperature of things. The only use for ducts and blowing air is to refresh air, to exhaust used or dirty air, high CO2 content, and replace it with oxygenated air. So it's 100% fresh air. So 100% fresh air, operable windows, tell me those aren't pretty appealing things today, right? So as opposed to the sealed glass building that uses ducts and recirculates air around it, no, go the other way. So, and the radiant heating and cooling system was, we weren't the first project to do it in Chicago. We're probably the fifth or something like that. So there was a little bit of concern, if you haven't followed it, that if you have radiant cooling, that there's a concern that the humidity in the air will find the cold surface, meet the dew point, and start dripping on people. And so in theory, that might happen, but our engineer had done it on a number of projects and observed that it never actually condenses. And so office buildings like this one are frankly drier than you'd think, and you can do humidity control. You have to do humidity control the minute you do radiant cooling. But those things together, the radiant cooling system was a cost premium. And you're going to ask me, you should ask me what the premium was. And I want to say it was, maybe a 5 or 10% premium in the MEP section of the budget. But because the transformation, the prior building had 8-foot floor to ceiling, height, they were just pancake short floors. We didn't have the luxury of adding, soffits and ducts and so on underneath those. So the fact that the radiant panels are really 1.5 inches and mount snug to the underside of the slab made them, quite the only choice in a lot of ways. So all those sort of systems work together. I meant to include a picture of our design team. We drag people to meetings, and we have all team meetings. We call them integrated design workshops. We start with kind of the premise of we want to get to this great, performance outcome, this sort of thing, and empower the team to have no bad ideas. You can talk about things out of your discipline. You can have cross jurisdictional, cross-disciplinary ideas, things like that. And, and we invite the academics and the clients to sort of watch this and observe it and to please contribute too. So it's a team success in the end. I mean, maybe we're the Yoda or the quarterback or something, but, we rely on our team a lot.
Thank you. So this next question, I'm going to read it fully because it has to do with, one way, would you talk about you leveraging connection between communities, right? The way that you redesigned it to make it more welcoming, and the walkway connector. One thing we're thinking about is how architecture can reinforce power structures. Do you have any guidance or thoughts on how to make architecture anti-racist and how to leverage it to help dismantle unhealthy white power structures? Maybe in the same way you built the building to reduce obesity, sort of in similar vein.
I love that question. I will humbly do my best. One thing I would say is that the design of this building, there was a tension about reflecting existing power structures that existed in the Harris School and all of academia, the kind of feudalism. And the tension came around the idea that the dean wanted a very egalitarian thing, which was that everyone should be able to run into casually everybody else. So if you're a student and you admire that professor, you're going to see him on the stair, you're going to be able to pull him aside and have a little chat so that people would be accessible. So needless to say, in the academic world, that's a disaster for faculty. They hate it. They want to just go to their room. They want to have the lights off so that no student knows that they're actually there, so they can, write their published research and sort of keep their tenure intact. So there was that tension about, should we enclave the faculty or make it more democratic and accessible? So the compromise was that the office floors 2 and 3, where the faculty offices are pretty quiet. There's perimeter offices in many of those, but all of the common areas are totally, mix it up free. So as to race, I don't know that I have any specific recommendations vis-a-vis race, other than what we tried to do was to reflect that some people wanted to be kept apart, some people wanted to be brought together, and the design sort of struck a balance between those two things. So not explicitly a race remedy, if you will, but certainly a social mixing remedy. And I'll just say the recruitment has been really positive, and Alicia could probably add more there, but we talk a lot to the the dean and to the CEO of Harris, and recruitment was way up and social mixing is way up. So, boy, that was a great question. If you come with that answer, please call me first. Please call me first.
Thank you. I'm not sure who wrote it, but thank you from everybody. Yeah. So you answered this a little bit in one of your responses, but what was the final outcome of the genderless bathrooms? It sounded like there was a lot of tension, but how did that resolve? What I wrote was that was an active debate, and then you were thinking about whether or not it would restrict people wanting to visit you.
Right. Right. I led you to the precipice and didn't deliver the goods. So the compromise that we ended up building was, if I had that plan, you remember the plan was kind of divided, could go gender segregated or not, was in the end, we were forced to install a removable panel that allowed us to segregate left and right, male and female, so 2 genders. And that really came from, it was the city of Chicago plumbing inspector using the authority of the state of Illinois plumbing code to tell us we couldn't do it. None of this was written down. It was all interpretation. It really was, there's an expression in Chicago of kind of old school Chicagoans speak and dem dare does, so old white guys in the plumbing department. And they really had this theory like, no, you don't understand. Women will be assaulted if we take that barrier down. So. Okay. We couldn't do it, but on the day we're actually on our next project, we're now working with the mayor's office. Leisha, I haven't even told you this, to see if we can get gender neutral, all gender bathrooms permitted as of right. So we're trying to, and we've got our mayor's changed since then. Mayor Lightfoot, I think, is a real advocate and has a good red phone to the governor's office. So hopefully we'll get this one done.
So the petitioner was still put in, is what I heard. Okay, yeah. The next time, right?
Well, just, on this one, I don't want to gloss over it. There's a big environmental, side to the all gender bathrooms. So the plumbing code in Illinois and Chicago mandates an extraordinary number of plumbing fixtures, in my opinion, to create work for plumbers. I'm sure this has never happened in any other jurisdiction across the United States, but it afflicts us here. So, you think about it, like how many bathrooms do you need to, for men and for women, in normal course of events? And if you're having like a women's luncheon or something, you do have to kind of oversupply because of the gender restrictions. So this is a very University of Chicago observation, but I think that there's a free market in bathrooms the minute that they're all gender, because, if it's a women's luncheon or men's luncheon or whatever, I don't have to, the market isn't segregated to me. Yeah. Like I can only access half the bathroom. So it's really the right thing to do. Over time, it should save space in buildings, plumbing fixtures, and the whole bit. But I can talk bathrooms,
Thank you, Doug. We have a bio break after this. I think everyone can probably talk bathroom right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. So our next question, we have time for about 2 more questions here. And some of them I think might be a quicker response. So we might be able to add some more. How long did the project take from concept to opening? To opening the forum?
We were hired in 2009. We were engaged to do a kind of conceptual design to describe the extent of the project to be used for soliciting, development support. And then the big recession happened in 2009 and 2010, and we sort of sat on our hands. And what was thought to be a 18-month to 2-year development ramp up was really 5 years. So we got the call back in 2014 to resume. The dean had changed, various players in the university had changed. So from conception in 2009 to opening in January 2019 was 10 years.
Great, thank you. Do you have an acoustical consultant? Someone said we have an open concept building like this as well, and the sound is an issue for all the meeting rooms that don't have full height walls.
Yeah. No, we did. I think our acoustician was Shen Milson Wilkie. They're based here, but they're good acousticians all over. And acoustics was a big deal because to get the square footages down, as Alicia said, Dean Dearmar was willing to go to bat for smaller things and to kick people out of private offices into more shared space. And that was mostly postdoc and non-tenured staff. But acoustics was a concern. And so we have those large light courts or two-story buildings and kind of open plan around it. So it's really quiet. It works. And I'm sure there are a million tricks, but every surface that you can make acoustically non-live, you need to. So, but if anybody has questions after this, just send them my way.
Awesome, thank you. We might have a couple of questions that we don't get to today that we'll send to your way, but how about we end on this question here, Doug? And once again, thank you so much for your presentation. It made me want to be in Chicago right now, walking through that building. Yeah. Another time. But what is your advice on how we make renovations like this the norm? So thinking about taking health and equity and happiness into consideration.
Well, that's great. So Alicia and I will, when we're back having cocktails, I'm sure debate this, but we took, I think, the ugly duckling on campus, this mid-century building, which had been, neo-Langley. It's half joking, but really true. It was a bleak building up on a plinth. It's all concrete. It hadn't been cleaned in 20 years. The windows were tiny, no natural light. It was awful. And so we also had to endure some skepticism on the part of the Harris School that they hadn't lost the lottery. It's like, okay, they were the youngest academic unit on campus. They were, founded like 30 years earlier. The next youngest unit on campus was 100 years old. So like Harris was really the teenager on campus. And they said, this is so great, we've got ourselves a permanent home. But it's the stone building, and that's a terrible building. Like, Doug, are they screwing? They didn't say it. Are they screwing us? But like a lot of skepticism that the transformation would take and be desirable. So so I think the basics, natural light, variety of spaces, finding habitats for a spectrum of human beings from extrovert to introvert to quiet to loud. All those basics, did well. I also think that this overlay of public health and policy, the active stair, which, does 10 things for us. I don't know how often the elevators even comes on. I think it just sort of sits there closed, powered down. So, I mean, there's a kind of environmental thing there, making sure that human power is used for things that human power can do best, like climbing stairs, things like that. So I love the racial question. That one's going to kind of stick with me in terms of going forward, but in terms of taking a very stratified subset of the university campus, faculty, staff, students, and all the hierarchies and feudalisms of that, and making a mixing space, I think it's a better story because we retained the building. And the other thing to say is we did do an event, there's in the kind of green building arena, if you're not familiar with Ed Masria and the Architecture 2030 Challenge, there's a real renewed focus on embodied carbon. And so we did, because we had a cast concrete building, we did run the numbers on what would it look like if we just leveled it and came back with an all new building. And what we found was the embodied carbon for the concrete frame was about 3 years of operating energy. So, you could justify doing it because it's not that many years, and you could probably get a better performance overall. But in terms of the story about the south side of the Midway and the mid-century portfolio of the university, there's a Mies, there's a Saarinen, and there's a Stone. That I think it's a richness that we couldn't have gotten with a new building. So if anyone's got, find the ugly duckling, buy the infrared camera attachment for your iPhone and send me the pictures of how bad it is. And, and then a couple of those layers of it's really ugly, it sucks at energy, no one wants to be in it. That's your project.
Thank you, Doug, so much. We're gonna say goodbye to you and thank you. And I'm not sure if Alicia or Sarah, if you want to say anything else, but I just wanted to, I'm gonna stop recording. And then we're going to move on to our bio break soon.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, Doug. That was fabulous. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.